ThePrint off the cuff, presenting partner HDFC Mutual Fund Bharosa Apno Ka, experience partner The Quorum, beverage partner, fashion partner Burgoyne, the original linen, established 1912.
And thank you all for coming in. I know Saturday evening everybody has a lot to do. I also have to thank our guest, Chief Marshal VR Chaudhari, the last Chief of the Air Force. So a lot of the modernization. Indian Armed Forces have gone through phases of modernization. These things don't happen consistently. Something or the other happens, and then we go through a big, rapid phase of modernization. In fact, our defense 5-year plans also started in the wake of the 1962 war, when somebody from Maharashtra, Y.B. Chavan, became defense minister, and he launched India's first defense 5-year plan. And that is what the Pakistanis were not prepared for in 1965. They thought Indian armed forces were as underprepared as they were in 1962, but they didn't realize what a big difference just 3 years had made. And they didn't win that war. Because they didn't win that war, they lost that war, because they were the only ones with an objective. The Air Force is at the cutting edge of technology. Air Force is the most capital intensive and technology intensive of all our forces. I know the Army and the Navy will have arguments, but when we bring people from Army and the Navy, I will say more flattering things to them. But they'll be factual, just as this is factual. The Air Force is very few people, very few weapons. It's not as if 1.5 million rifles will fire or 3,000 machine guns will fire. Ultimately, it's about 350, 400 aircraft that will fight. Air Force is also unique that this is the only one of the three forces where fighting is combat is carried out by officers, right? In the Army, they can be a company commander who will have 2 captains under him, who will have a lieutenant, a JCO, NCOs, etc., etc. Company will have maybe 150 other ranks. In the Air Force, it's just that one man, or now woman as well, who goes out to fight. If it's a Sukhoi, which a Chief Marshal likes, then it will be 2. There'll be a pilot and there'll be a weapons officer. That's why Sukhois are the ones launching these BrahMos missiles into Pakistani air bases. Every Pakistani air base east of the Indus was hit between the night of the 9th and the afternoon of the 10th. In 12 hours, every Pakistani air base east of the Indus was hit. And there are pictures available, and these are not pictures that anybody could have photoshopped. These are pictures from global satellite companies, global commercial satellite companies. In the 2 wars of 65 and 71, when Indian Air Force carried out really brave attacks over these air bases, not a fraction of this damage was caused. So this is a reminder to the world about what air power means, besides the fact that it's a reminder to the Pakistanis as well. In fact, Air Chief Marshal will answer this as we go along. If this had gone on for another 24 hours, I'm quite sure they would have hit every air base west of the Indus as well. Because this is also a reminder to Pakistan that they have a liability. And that liability is called the lack of strategic depth. Pakistan does not have depth. That's why they have these fantasies that they will control Afghanistan. They will do something with Iran. So they will get strategic depth. So the idea of delivering a strategic message is to remind your adversary of their weaknesses, which is what the Indian Air Force did in this case, at which point I'm stopping this preamble. With me is Snehesh Alex Philip. If you follow ThePrint, you watch him often. In fact, even when you see me talking things about defense, he has tutored me. So if I get anything wrong, he's to blame. And we go back a long time because even when he was still in school or college, his dad and I were colleagues.
His dad, Mr. A.J. Philip, he was the editor of the opinion pages at the Indian Express. So Snehesh is a dada with defense, Army, Navy, Air Force, and he also can balance between the three. तो इसको होना चाहिए Chief of Defence Staff actually. कम से कम मीडिया में तो ये Chief of Defence Staff है, because he can argue on every side. And Air Chief Marshal himself needs no introduction. Now, how we are going to do this is everything is on the record. Nothing pleases speakers more than seeing a full hall. It's a full hall, so fantastic. Thank you, Quorum Club. Thank you, Roli. This is Roli Kachru, my colleague of more than 15 years now, and 20 years, and she's the one who's made all of this possible. So thank you very much, Roli. Well done. And thank you, Vivek, and your team at Quorum Club. This is a great partnership. So ask your questions. I will do Snehesh and I will do a few questions, and you can ask your question at any time. It's not as if we'll hog all the time and then give you 5 minutes in the end. As an you can raise your hand anytime. The microphone will come to you. Please introduce yourself and keep your question short, and he will answer your questions. Chief.
Thank you very much, Shekhar, and good evening to all of you. Good evening, Mumbai. Pleasure to be here. And what better ways to start the evening than to hear from Shekhar Gupta such high praise for the Air Force and air power. Thank you very much.
The role of air power today. There's always been a mystique about air power, going back to First World War, right? The mystique, but today, air power has completely changed in its role. Air power has now become air dominance. How has this role changed, and what does Op Sindoor tell us about this?
To go back into, like you mentioned, the evolution of air power, the air forces came into being just a little over 100 years ago. And the evolution has been very rapid, keeping in pace with the technological changes. Like Shekhar just mentioned, the Air Forces are very sensitive to technology. So every generation sees a huge leap in the capabilities of an Air Force or the air power in general. Right from the First World War, when airplanes were used to drop small bombs manually by pilots, to what we see now in Operation Sindoor, where coming in close contact with the adversary is something of the past now. We have now graduated to using beyond range weapons, both from air to air, air to ground, and ground to air. Everything is now beyond visual range. So it requires good identification of friend or foe, as we call it. It requires great integration of all the networks. It requires situational awareness. So all this, like Shekhar also mentioned, it's the man in the cockpit or the man behind the man or woman now, behind the controls in a surface-to-air guided weapon system or in an aircraft, that has got a lot of workload to do to remain ahead of the adversary at all times. So here, I would like to just use two words which I like these terms very much. Is Air Forces, we have graduated it to a place where we not only like to have information superiority, but also decision superiority. That is, we are able to collect information through our resources, and not merely intelligence of the enemy whereabouts, but real-time dynamic information. And information superiority, when any side has, then you are able to take a decision faster. And a quick decision is what will upset the enemy's chain of thought. It will upset his reaction capability. So this is a thing that air power focuses on, to be able to decide quickly, to be able to hit hard where it matters.
So what is air dominance?
So there is the term called control of the air. There are various degrees of, where you have control of the air. When you talk about air dominance or air superiority, we are looking at a situation where the enemy air power is unable to use any of its resources. So that means you have put down his air force to an extent where nobody can fly. And now your armies, your navies are free to operate without any interference from the enemy. So that is the pinnacle of air dominance, is air superiority. A little below that, we call it, limited air superiority, or limited control of the air over an area for a limited period of time. So it's a degree of control of air which actually culminates into air dominance.
We're talking about Op Sindoor. So before I start, congratulations on this fantastic operation. Now, in the Op Sindoor, you had reports, even the government has claimed about over 100 terrorists being killed. Personally, I don't give it much credit of whether it was 100 terrorists killed, whether it is 200 terrorists killed, because the terrorists will keep coming up. It's like a production agency out there. So what is the success of Op Sindoor in the true sense? And what really made Pakistan? I still remember I did a story saying that on 7th May, when Indian Air Force and the Indian Army struck the 9 terror camps, the DGMO called up the Pakistan DGMO, and then he was asked to, the Pakistan DGMO did not really talk, right? But on the 10th, they reached out to India. They reached out to the rest of the world also, US also. So what is the real success of Op Sindoor?
If I may just add a word, what our DGMO said, that when he called after the initial strikes and said, look, we don't want to do anything else, we can call it off, he got a brusque reply. He got a brusque reply that, no, we are not calling anything off. Be prepared for something, a tough reply from us. Yes.
Yeah, yes. So I think this is a very clear enunciation of the national security strategy, firstly. That, it has brought about a real paradigm change in the way we are going to deal with such incidents in the future. That we will hit them hard where it matters and at the time and place of our choosing. So I think this is a huge change in the entire strategic thought process of the nation. Coming to your point about the point where they waved the white flag and called for ceasefire, I think the intensity, the ferocity of the attacks by the Indian Air Force on the 10th shook them up really. Attacking their primary air bases, hitting them where it matters, where it hurts most, is something which really made them run and come up with the white flag and call for a ceasefire.
Just for the audience, when you say, you hit them where it hurts the most, what does that mean?
Like we just mentioned about, the enemy air dominance or air superiority. If I am able to strike his airfields and his critical assets, which prevents him from launching his air force, I've achieved a certain favorable air situation or a degree of control of the air. Now he understands that if I'm able to target with pinpoint accuracy the runways, the hangars, the communications centers, the radars, he knows what is going to come in the next wave of attack if it happens. Okay, it will paralyze him completely.
I mean, some of these weapons are so accurate, weapons that Rafale fired, for example, that they could, God forbid, but they could cut a neat hole through this building and land on this cup of tea. So if you see pictures of Bahawalpur, those 3 domes, you see holes on them. Domes have not collapsed. You see domes. So the missile has gone through the dome and gone inside, and then it has burst. And you can then see how much destruction it causes inside. Is my description correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if I may add, and please tell me if I'm wrong, on the 10th, when Indian Air Force was carrying out this massive assault, and we know this from the Pakistanis, because Pakistanis said that every missile was air-launched. Even BrahMos, they didn't say they were ground-launched. They said everything was air-launched, which means a large number of IAF aircraft were doing all this tamasha with so many of Pakistan's wanted airfields. But the Pakistani Air Force never rose to contest them. How did that happen?
Typically a classical case of, a strike like this would be preceded by blinding his radars and neutralizing his surface-to-air guided weapon systems.
There is an expression for that, sir, if you can tell them.
Yeah, it is called the SEAD, Suppression of Enemy Air Defenses, or DAD. It spells like dead. That is destruction of enemy air defenses. So this is usually a prelude before you carry out any other deep offensive strike. But it's not always necessary to carry it out. There are ways and means we can avoid the enemy air defenses by what we call tactical routing, by selecting, routes even for the weapons that will avoid coming in the way of the enemy air defenses. So that's what we did at that time.
While we talk about the aircraft that were in use, the fact is that the Integrated Air Defense Command also had a huge role. Remember, viewers, that the Pakistanis had launched multiple waves of drone attacks. Now, some of these drones in the initial phases were just reconnaissance drones. It didn't have any munitions, it didn't have any bombs or explosives on it, right? What they were trying to do was try to find where the Indian air defense systems were. And then Pakistan would have launched what he said is SIAD and the DR. So how did the Integrated Air Defense Command really work? And who is in charge of the Integrated Air Defense Command? You have the Army and you also have the Air Force.
The Integrated Air Command and Control System is primarily an Air Force network of all the sensors as well as the shooters. I'm using these two words. Sensors are radars, detection systems of various kinds. And the shooters are the ground-to-air missiles or air-to-air missiles, which are carried by the fighter aircraft. So now the entire system of sensors and shooters is integrated on one network. This is the IACCS. Now the Indian Army has got a newer version of it called the Akash Tir, which has now been integrated along with the Indian Air Force's IACCS system. So this integrated network now has got every single entity on one common grid. So it gives us more flexibility as to which weapon to use. If I have a slow-moving drone coming in, I'm not going to fire a very expensive missile at it. I know it's a slow-moving drone, I will allot it to one of the army guns. If it's a ballistic missile coming, I'll allot it to a particular unit which can tackle it. So overall, there is not only economy of effort, there is actually you're getting the best bang for the buck.
Your system can identify what threat is coming, whether it's a ballistic missile or it's a cruise missile or it's a drone.
Generally, we can. The speeds are known, the trajectories are predictable. So the trajectory of a ballistic missile, for example, is quite predictable. The cruise missiles are not very high speed. The drones are really low speed. So going by what we call the characteristics of the radar track, we can make out what kind of a threat is.
So cruise missiles, some are high speed. BrahMos is high speed.
Yes.
BrahMos is high speed, and you can see the difference between a high speed cruise missile and a not high speed, a subsonic cruise missile. So if all of you have seen that picture over Sirsa on the night of 9th and 10th, I think around 1 a.m. So that missile, which one of our missiles has intercepted and hit over Sirsa, is obviously a cruise missile which is not traveling that fast. And the Pakistanis said that was a Fateh 2.
It could have been a Fateh 2.
Could have been a Fateh 2 because that's what Shehbaz Sharif said, that we used a Fateh 1 and Fateh 2. So that is how, this is a very complex thing because even if one gets through, it can cause damage.
Yeah.
So, we have the 36 Rafales in place. We talk about fighter jets, squadron strength. Right now, on paper, India has 31 squadrons of fighters. When I say on paper, I say because it's the official record. But then many of them, the MiG-21s are 2 squadrons. The actual numbers in terms of real fighting capability is less than 30. The sanctioned strength is 42. What do you think that needs to be done? You're talking about Tejas Mark 1A delivery has been delayed. People say a lot blame also goes to the Air Force because it kept changing the requirements. The Air Force and the Air Force chief has, blamed the production agencies for failed promises. So where does the Air Force go from here? You're talking about Pakistan getting the 5th generation fighters from China. China has already developed what they term it as the 6th generation fighters, 2 6th generation fighters. We are still on 4.5 generation and not in large numbers.
So, the nation and the leadership is quite aware that the depleting strength is a matter of concern and we need to, take remedial measures. we had placed all our bets on the LCA, the timely deliveries and production of the LCA Mark 1As, the 2s, and further on the AMCA. Here is, like I said, where the industry needs to really, everybody, all the players need to put their shoulder behind the wheel to get things moving much faster than what is happening now. Because timely deliveries is very essential to keep our strength as desired to counter any adversary at this stage. The aspect about our adversaries getting the 5th and 6th generation fighters, there is no denying that there is a lot of hype about the capabilities of these systems. We really don't know what the true capability. But nevertheless, we granted that a 5th generation fighter will come with certain enhanced features, more than what we have right now, the 4.5 generation fighters. And here is where the AMCA, the AMCA, which is designed and developed by the ADA and going to be manufactured now in India, should roll out at the earliest and, fill in the depleting strength of squadrons at the earliest. So it's very critical that we take it on as a national task to be able to fulfill the shortcomings in terms of numbers immediately.
So, while we of course talk about shortcomings in the fighter squadron strength, the fact is that besides the fighters, there are also other things that are much needed, which are part of the war. For example, AWACS, it's the eye in the sky, or refuelers. Both these programs, India has been on it for so many years. So how critical are these systems also? And when you say, when you look at the Air Force, how critical is the Air Force right now in terms of capability gap? The Air Force has carried out the operation very well, but in terms of a continued conflict, right? How critical is the Air Force right now?
So, like you mentioned, fighter aircraft form a part, the cutting edge of any Air Force. They are the front edge, the shooters, the combat elements. But apart from that, like you mentioned, we need the combat enhancers or the combat support elements, which come in the form of the AWACS. AWACS is an aircraft with a radar fitted on it, which can look well into the enemy territory. So it's an airborne warning and control system. So they are all what we would term as the combat enhancers. And then we have the combat support elements like the air-to-air refueling. And so all of them go hand in hand. It is not merely bolstering capability in one direction. Just the combatants are not good enough. We need simultaneous bolstering of capability in all the other fronts also. And we've realized this some years ago. Unfortunately, the number of people or the players in the market for air-to-air refueling, for example, is quite limited.
You have the Airbus and the Boeing, which is there.
For the AWACS, we had decided that we will go the indigenous route. So unfortunately, we don't manufacture a big transport aircraft in India. So we have to import that aircraft, and now we put in our systems, our radar on top of that.
So, when we talk about manufacturing and you say that, the Indian industry should come forward, till now, at least till last week, if, it was given to understand that any fighter that would be made in India would be made by HAL. Now the government has taken an initiative which has opened up this sector for the private players also, which means that the private players can also come in. How critical is it for the private industry to step in? Tata has a collaboration with Airbus, and they're already making the C295, which is the transport aircraft. But how critical is it for the private sector to come in?
It's absolutely. I mean, it's there for all of us to see that the capability of the public sector is what it is today. And unless we bolster it with active participation from the private industry, the final production line, the number of aircraft which are going to come out of the production line is not going to get enhanced. So we need to have private players. I will not name them, but there are many of them in the country who are capable of taking on the job of not just producing components, but even carrying out the system integration and carrying out, the final assembly of fighter aircraft.
He spoke about the AWACS system. So this is all public information, and he said that we don't make a large aircraft, so we have to import an aircraft and put stuff on it. You see, AWACS systems usually have a radome on top of it, so somebody has to cut open the plane, fix that, And inside, it's a radar lab. It's a radar and computer lab. There are people sitting inside, and they are the ones who are the masters of the aerial battlefield, because they are telling the pilots what to do from a distance. They even tell you when to fire and what to fire. Now, that is the area where Pakistan has done a good job of optimizing themselves. So they've got 9 of these Swedish Saab areas. So there's a uniformity in this. And because they know they are optimized for defense. They've always been a defensive air force. Whereas we keep waiting, we take time deciding. So our main instrument is the Netra, which is built on an Embraer platform, a Brazilian Embraer platform. I think some years back, government cleared the basic idea of buying 6 more of these and putting our DRDO electronics on it. But that is, Delhi mein bolte hain, George Fernandez used to say, file goes into orbit, right? So that's in orbit. And again, Indian Air Force has bought 6 of the Airbus A321s, which Air India was not going to use as Air India was being privatized. Those 6 are with the Air Force. And now I think negotiations have been going on forever with Airbus to take these to Toulouse, cut these up, and so that DRDO can then start putting stuff on them. So in our system, things take time. Too much time, sir?
Unfortunately, yes, much longer than what is desired. But the most satisfying part of it is finally the end product will be made in India product. And we don't have to rely on somebody else when the chips are down to provide components or to provide spares or to rectify, to maintain the system. So ultimately, it will be an Indian system. So that is a positive side of looking at it.
So we have a lot of our subscribers are all nerds. They could all be at least air commodores, right? So there is Srinidhi Rao who's asking, knowing that the opponent will upgrade his aerial systems, which I will translate as the opponent will also learn their lessons from this. Air defense as well as missiles, what route will we need to accelerate? Clearly, it will need to be multi-pronged approach. What role do you see for the loyal wingman? Please explain what the loyal wingman is. Soft kills for swarm drones, newer drone tech for our forces, role of space-based platforms. Basically, what is the next dimension we need to plan for?
Oh, that is going to take 1 hour.
I told you, our subscribers are nerds.
So,
आप सोचिए हमारी कितनी चैलेंज है, इतनी सी गलती होती है पकड़ लेते हैं.
So capability building, I like to put it in terms of A, B, C, D. A is for acquire or acquisition of new weapon systems. B is to boost the capabilities of existing systems. C, to conserve what we have. And D is to design and develop newer systems. So in all these 4 aspects, the Air Force plays a major role in ensuring that our capabilities do not drop down at any time. If we are unable to acquire something, then we would spend our time and energies in boosting the capabilities of the existing platforms. You're aware how we have upgraded the Mirage 2000s or the MiG-29s. We have upgraded our surface-to-air guided weapon systems. We have upgraded so many things.
Even the Sukhoi 30.
The Sukhoi 30 upgrade is also here. So we enhance the capability of the Air Force by upgrading till the time the acquisitions fructify. So this is the first part of the question. I'm sorry, there were too many parts in the... Repeat the...
What is a loyal wingman? That's the new buzzword, the loyal wingman.
So it's very fundamentally, the concept is that instead of having pilots flying, let's say a formation of 8 to 10 aircraft carrying out different roles, you have an unmanned aerial vehicle, a UAV, with similar capabilities, which can carry weapons, which can, hit targets on the ground or in the air. And your lead fighter aircraft is carrying them as the wingman, the unmanned ones. So the threat of, getting hit by an enemy weapon system and loss of human life is not there. Unfortunately, today the costs of building a loyal wingman aircraft, with similar. It has to fly at the same speed as the parent mother aircraft. It has to be able to deliver large amount of weapons. So it's going to be big. There's no point having a small loyal wingman who can deliver a few kilos of ammunition. You need something big. If it is going to be big, it's going to be expensive. It requires huge amount of artificial intelligence to be embedded in it, to be able to transfer data at multiple gigabits speed. To, for example, if the fighter aircraft picks up a target, to be able to transfer the data accurately to the loyal wingman who can now fire the weapon. It requires huge amount of software upgrades and AI embedded into it. So
the Russians have tried to use this a couple of times in Ukraine. And I think in a couple of cases, the loyal wingman got shot down.
Yes.
So it protects the pilot.
It does.
It does.
But it's again, we can keep debating till the cows come home. What is the cost-benefit analysis of having a...
Anybody who wants to ask a question, please raise your hand. So we'll have the microphone coming to him. Let me also add that these drones that you saw coming from Pakistan, thousands of them, many of them were AI-enabled. So those then help them by sending electronics backwards to identify gaps in Indian air defense, through which they could then send missiles or they could send aircraft. Go ahead. Your name's?
My name is Ajay Hatangdi. My question is, it seems to me that war is inevitable, given how we've drawn a line in the sand, saying that any act of terrorism is likely to be construed as an act of war. And that is, I don't see any change on the other side of the border on how they support terrorism. I hope one of you have a different answer to what I have, but I feel like war is inevitable and it is a distinct possibility in the near future. Given what has happened, have we overplayed our hand in terms of how we've revealed what our strategy is on attack and defense? And what mechanisms are there to learn from what we've experienced in the war?
I think this is Shekhar is right up your alley.
I think you should answer this.
This is his CI. Sufficient.
He's trying to make me a loyal wingman. But this is not non-human, so he has to answer it.
Yeah, I would best avoid anything with little political connotations to it as to what the strategies are. Okay.
But at the same time, you said the war is inevitable. I think, I don't know whether the war is inevitable or not, but the fact is that we need to spend more on defense, much more than what is being done right now. Because people look at defense and say that, a strong military means that, the country is preparing for a war. You need a strong military not to fight wars. You need a strong military to deter a war, to stop a war from taking place.
Yeah. Somebody has a microphone there.
Hi, my name is Lakshatha. My question was, given the Air Marshal's answer about ABCD, just to understand, we have various ships and aircrafts with technologies like Israeli radars, different country ka weapon system, different country ka plane. How much of a strength or a weakness is this from A, an operational perspective, B, a security perspective, and C, a Babu approval perspective? Because that is also a massive issue, not political at all, just from a Babu perspective.
It's always like, this glass is half full or half empty. It has its plus points to have systems from different stables and not putting all your eggs in one basket. So, like you said, an integration of a French and Israeli, a Russian system onto one platform is actually quite an ideal way of going about it. Because, God forbid, I'm not mentioning these countries in particular, but let's say some company shuts down or somebody, you embargoed by sanctions or something, then alternative paths are always available. So it gives us a little more flexibility in terms of the operational usage when we have platforms and weapon systems from different origins. So if one route is closed, the others are still open. On the other hand, the challenges in integrating all the systems The Sukhoi 30, for example, has been that's why the Sukhoi 30, the full name is Sukhoi 30 MKI, I for India, because we integrated various systems from various countries and put it together on one platform. So that's a big challenge, particularly if they are coming from, two different countries, like let's say the Russian side or the French side. It's a huge challenge to integrate them. But we have now learned to do it. Our labs are quite adept at it. Yeah.
India has done a good job of integrating multiple technologies and systems on one platform. That also comes from necessity. For a long time, the MiGs, for example, they were flying with French missiles, the Matra series missiles, right? Until the R-77s and 73s came in. So India has done a good job of this because necessity is like that. Yeah. Necessity is like that. That question there?
My name is Partho Das Gupta. My question is very simple. You have mentioned and you read numerous reports of the dearth of fighter aircraft and delays by HAL in producing them. I think from what the reports are, the main component, which is the engine, is a big issue, right? And it also depends on US sanctions, this and that. Don't we have an Indian company making engines? Do you see an Indian company making engines in the short run?
Actually, the old adage which says that it's not rocket science actually gets dwarfed by the complexity of an jet engine. It probably is one of the most, complex engineering, feat that is actually put together to be able to generate this kind of thrust at those.
We are making things in ISRO, which is generating.
Yeah, so like I said, rocket science has been, upended by aeronautical engineering or aeronautical engines science. It is really, really complicated. The Kaveri engine program has been running for many years now. They have reached a certain level of maturity. Unfortunately, they're not yet operationally available. No private player today in our country has ventured into manufacturing aircraft engines, apart from small engines which will power drones or something like that. But an engine which is going to develop 100 kilonewtons of thrust is really a very complex task. It is going to require a lot of research and development and a lot of work by our industry.
Very few countries make engines. Suppose we had not bought the Rafale but bought its rival, Eurofighter. That engine would have been what? That engine would have been an American engine?
No, it's in consortium.
Consortium engine. And if you had bought from the Swedes, Gripen, that would have had the same GE engine that we are using. So there are very few engine makers because lots of things go into an engine and you have to have economies of scale to be able to. So for a private company to do it, I will just explain it. For a private company to do it, there has to be the assurance of a very large order in the course of time. And that's the reason this remains confined to public sector. Am I right to say, sir?
Absolutely.
So I have a question from a subscriber and then we'll come to the floor. Mohit Batra, importance of coordination between the three services and how is it synchronized considering they use different systems?
There are various ways of networking. It doesn't have to have a commonality of systems to be able to network. So this is the same point that I mentioned earlier. Integration of different systems together into a strong, stable, multiple redundant network is the crux to achieving this kind of enjointness here.
And then cost of soccer, who says considering the hostile neighbors we have on three sides now, he's adding Bangladesh, I'll be a bit careful. Do you not think the wait for Make in India is just too prolonged? Isn't it wise to buy foreign top-class equipment to fill up the gap till the time our red tape delivers what we so desperately need?
Once again, it is not the question of where we're getting it from. It is how quickly we can get the equipment. That is more important.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Nikhil Mohta. So in social media and otherwise, there have been a lot of memes going around about failed Chinese missiles and performance of Chinese aircrafts in this recent Operation Sindoor. What is your take on the Chinese equipment that Pakistan has been using and sort of the superiority or otherwise of some of these equipment?
It's too early now. The dust has barely settled on what has transpired in those 90 hours early this month.
87 hours.
87 hours early this month. It will take some time for the analysts to actually piece everything together, put the jigsaw puzzle together to see whether the capabilities were actually as they boast them to be, or whether inferior or in any way exaggerated. So it is going to take some time. It's probably too early to make a comment on the capability of those systems.
You have the microphone.
Hi, my name is Alfred Aramban. Sir, very early you mentioned that Operation Sindoor achieved great success in damaging several Pakistani airfields. You also followed in strategic warfare to say that we could have paralyzed them. Why didn't we do it in the very first instance? A layman's language is pehle hi maro, jor se maro, be aggressive. Why didn't we do that? Second is, it's a follow-up to the last question. Would you care to comment about, the Chinese claim or the Pakistani claim of the Chinese system against the Rafale?
Yeah, once again, like I said, the first part is purely a political decision. It has, the Air Force or any of the armed forces would not have been allowed to take the decision on their own. When it comes to the second part of the claims and counterclaims, like I said, it's a bit too early. It requires a lot of analysis of, from track movements, from what is found on the ground, the debris, to put everything together. So it's too early to comment on that.
Well, I can explain what he left unexplained because he's a more responsible person than me. The political directive was that to say that we are not at war with Pakistani military. We are at war with terrorists. And we are attacking these terrorists' headquarters. And that's the message that was conveyed, which was then sort of misread. And people said, Jaishankar told them earlier, no. After these were hit, the Pakistani side were told, listen, we haven't come to war with you. We only came to hit these terrorist centers. So that's why some of the things that an air force of this size would have done before launching these attacks, what he said earlier, that is suppression of enemy air defense and destruction of enemy air defense, SEAD and DEAD, that could not have been carried out because that would have been war on the Pakistani military. And that was a political decision. However, on the 8th and 9th, all of the 8th and 9th, the Air Force did just that. If you see these Herop drones, which suddenly the Pakistanis were finding flying over their country, before they figured out what they were doing, they had taken out the radar and HQ-9 system in Lahore. And they had damaged some other air defenses in Pakistan. And then because they knew that anti-radiation weapons were coming in, they must have switched off their systems. Because these weapons they catch the radiation and then they go tracking that. So that is how on the 10th, they were able to carry out a proper Air Force operation, offensive. Am I right, sir?
You hit the nail on the head, absolutely.
So, that's because he leaked the paper to me. I'm the proxy.
So shall I speak?
Yes.
Okay, hi, I'm Bachi Karkaria. You spoke about shortcomings in delivery, you spoke about integration, but I have a wider question, and that is in this very, very complex system, political, economic, technical, what would you say is the weakest link?
Was there a weakest link? No, you tell me. No, like you said, I would like to say that the comprehensive national power, as we call it, is dependent on 4 elements. It's called the DIME, the diplomacy, information, military, and economy. So it's the combination of all these 4 which forms the comprehensive national power. So if you are weak, let's say in one element, in economy, then you probably make up by stronger information.
Sorry, but that's your theoretical thing. On the ground, would you like to share where you find the link is?
You have me stumped on this one. Actually, spelling out a weakness here would actually tantamount to giving away a lot of our capabilities to our adversaries. So it's best avoided. I think I'll do it in private with you sometime.
I'm Kalpana Morparia. I got provoked into asking a question because they said no woman was asking a question. But I do have 2 questions for you. One is, Israel claims an Iron Dome. President Trump is now talking about it. Is this a pipe dream for us, or is there something we can think about? And the second is, you talk so much about how systems and technology is all important. So cyber warfare could also be a very significant threat, right? Given all of us are relying so much on it. Thanks.
Absolutely, ma'am. The first part is on the Iron Dome and what we have. What I mentioned, the integration of all the air defense elements, the sensors and the shooters. In Israel, that's what constitutes the Iron Dome. In India, we have our own system, the Integrated Air Command and Control System, which is also fusing all the sensors and the shooters together. It's only the quantity and the ranges of these systems which is making a difference. So if I have a weapon system which can protect me from 400 kilometers, so that forms the outer part of the dome, and the inner layer of the domes are formed by different weapon systems. So we have something similar like that. On the, I'm sorry. Yes, cyber definitely. It's a domain of warfare that we are very cognizant that it is going to, not only affect the other domains, but it's going to be one of the primary domains of warfare in future. And here let me hasten to add that I think these 2 domains, cyber and air power, can actually affect all other domains, whether it is land, maritime, space, can be affected through air power as well as cyber power. So we are cognizant of it. We are integrating it in a big way, offensive, defensive capabilities, to ensure that we are not hit by, cyber attacks.
So,
yes.
I'll continue. I'm so sorry. I'll continuing with her question. You talk about cyber. Today, the CDS General Anil Chauhan, while he was speaking at the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, he mentioned the fact that 15% of the operational time of Sindoor was spent on countering disinformation, right, which came in from Pakistan. Now, somehow is India lacking in an information warfare? I'm not talking about cyber, but information warfare. For example, when the Balakot strikes took place in 2019, I, as a journalist, I didn't come to know through the Indian military, but it was the ISPR DG who had tweeted out the information first, right? So, are we lacking on the information warfare front, and what can we do from there?
I think the realization has dawned definitely that we need to focus equally on this domain of conflict also, the information domain. And I think, you being in the journalistic field are best to answer this, whether we have changed from, let's say, in the last 5 years or not. And I think there is a change from what we saw from within the services. There definitely change taking place, maybe at a glacial pace, but definitely taking place, yes.
So I have 1.5 question from a member of Snehesh's team, Javeria Rana. Could you outline the key objectives that IAF accomplished during Operation Sindoor? Then she says, now Op Sindoor has set a new normal. How do you see IAF's role evolving in deterrence by punishment as distinct from traditional deterrence by denial? So 2 things are linked.
Yeah, if you look historically on the way the Air Force was restrained from using its offensive air power, whether it was even in the 1947-48 or in 62-65, it's only in 1971 that full freedom was given to the Indian Air Force to use its offensive element, and the results are there for everyone to see. Even during Kargil, we were restrained to a quite large extent from using offensive air power. This short conflict allowed full freedom for the offensive air power to be utilized the way, it was always envisaged to be, with no restraints. And the results are there for all to see. So I think this new change in the dynamics of allowing air power without the fear of escalation of conflict is going to change the way things will happen in our subcontinent.
Hello everyone, I'm Aarti Surendranath. I'm an army officer's daughter. My father's fought 62, 65 and 71. War is horrible. It's terrible. I'd like to ask you, which you're very familiar with, everyone comes together, the entire country and the nation comes together wonderfully when there is a war. Otherwise, all the services are separate and civilians are separate. There's no unity, there's no unification, there's no information. A lot of the questions asked here are because of that. I'd like to ask you, and I'd like you to share with everyone, because as a serviceman I know that is very lacking. What do you think, and how much of a difference do you think it would make to the entire country if civilians and all other sectors joined in with the army a lot more, with the armed forces a lot more?
Oh, thank you very much. I think this is something that we need to really ponder about, is what kind of role can, I would say, Aam Aadmi or a civilian play in such circumstances. The first thing I would say, we just mentioned about information warfare. The first would be not to indulge in false information and spreading false propaganda as responsible citizens. Second, in case the orders are given, let's say, for blackout measures or carrying out defensive measures, if everybody obeys those rules, it will be fantastic. You can enhance the capability of the armed forces by just doing what is expected to be done without breaking the
So this is a good opportunity which I'm not going to miss. Since you are a professional at this, how did you respond when you saw this warrior TV channels, which I call commando comic channels? Karachi has been written off. Islamabad has been captured. Lahore is taken. There is a coup in Pakistan. Right? These are your mainstream TV channels. And they have knocked the credibility. They have done more to knock the credibility of the Indian narrative, so I understand. But how were you looking at this?
Yeah, like you said, definitely the credibility is in question. So much of rhetoric and chest thumping actually is hurting oneself rather than achieving any aims. So this is something that people need to understand, that so much of kind of false propaganda or narrative is not going to get them anywhere. It's not going to boost the morale of the armed forces, or it's not going to boost the morale of the.
But will at least entertain the armed forces?
Why only armed forces? It will entertain the nation.
Hi, I'm Ashish Tripathi. Quick question. This is, when you destroy that kind of infrastructure with the, the AVACs and the radars and so on and so forth, given that this country keeps coming back to pick fights again and again, how much time do you think we buy when we destroy this equipment? How long does it take for Pakistan to actually rebuild this kind of infrastructure again?
It's quite, they cannot give you an answer in terms of hours or days. It depends on what has been hit, what is the intensity of the strike, whether it has really caused such massive damage that it's going to take months to recoup. If it is just mere physical damage to certain elements, they can be, repaired and brought back into service in a few days' time. Some elements, for example, if you're looking at, command and control or huge networks which have been hit, maybe they'll take much longer. But this is what the one of the primary roles of the intelligence agencies are, to give us a feedback as to whether we need to address the target once again, or has it been hit hard enough to keep it out of battle for a few days. So that's how the entire cycle of intelligence gathering and targeting takes place.
My name is Srinivas. Now, actually, quite a lot of arithmetic, like 42 squadrons and things like that, have come through in the past. In the light of, the BVR, the importance of BVR in this particular skirmish, is there a, necessary for us to go back to the drawing board about, what our, squadron strength has to be, of what particular capability, and, if the existing platforms can be upgraded to, all of them to some kind of, BVR capability? Is there any such kind of a thought?
What you have to look at is what kind of neighborhood we live in, what kind of adversaries we have, the constant threats that we face. And under these circumstances, quantity definitely has a quality of its own. Having adequate numbers, not only for deterrence, but to be able to counter any action by the adversaries, does require numbers, given the size of the country. So 42 is a figure that was arrived at some years ago. Today it could even be 60, given the capabilities. And you've seen now that how in a short skirmish it's going to be air power, which is going to be the primary domain that is going to be used. So the numbers of 42 may even be much higher than that.
So, but the 42 was also a compromise. If I'm not mistaken, the Air Force had put a report which had called for higher numbers, I think way back in 2011, 2012. And it was agreed to 42.
See, this debate has been ongoing for not few years, for many decades actually. And the numbers, like I said, will be dependent on what the threats are what you're being faced with. So if you've got now 2 front or 3 front, as they call it, the numbers are going to increase definitely.
So Ashley Tellis wrote, American academic, he wrote a paper a few years back where he said Indian Air Force needs 62 squadrons. And I keep saying that if we really want to carry out a theaterization of our armed forces, then it can only be done if the Air Force is 55 squadrons plus, because otherwise it has too few resources.
Exactly. So I was about to ask that question only. What happens to the theaterization concept after Op Sindoor? Now, theaterization, just for the viewers, is the fact that we have what India is trying to do is divide the military into theaters. So you'll have a Pakistan theater which looks after integrated military, which looks after the Pakistan border, a northern border that is China, and then a maritime command. So what happens to the whole concept of theaterization? Can Air Force be divided into theaters? Because I remember that I've done stories on this saying that the Air Force is against the whole concept of theaterization, and it feels that there should be one theater. Does this operation show anything of that?
Yeah, without going into this operation in particular, as a general point from the Air Force, like you mentioned, the strength or the numbers are inadequate to be divided. Secondly, the fundamental principle on which the Air Force works is what we call a centralized command, a distributed control, and a decentralized execution. So it is not the structures finally which are going to matter. As long as you don't shake up this entire way of working, that is, you have a centralized command. This Op Sindoor has given an example where, the assets are decided centrally at air headquarters. The control is distributed among the IACCS nodes and the regional commands. And the execution is by the fighting units, these fighting squadrons. So our stance has always been that let this chain of command remain, because it is the shortest chain of command. It achieves the best results with the limited resources.
Yes.
Hello, sir. I'm Kanika Kapoor. Thank you, firstly, for being with us this evening. I have 2 questions. The first one is, I felt very proud as an Indian of Operation Sindoor. I felt like we brought our enemies to their knees and we were very successful in our air defense. The same, if you remember, if you go back to the point in time where Hamas attacked Israel, it was quite a failure of air defense. Comparing the two, do you see any economic benefits to India as a whole in the future in terms of countries approaching us to buy defense and attack equipment from us? That's my first question. Because we already started, though we're very nascent in the stage of manufacturing, we are going that way. And my second question is, one thing that left me very confused was after a ceasefire was declared, after few hours, there were yet blackouts and there were Pakistani drones in Indian airspace. I didn't understand that. I'm yet very confused about that. Does the ceasefire allow that?
Yeah, the ceasefire is announced at the highest level. Probably it takes some time to percolate down to a small unit somewhere on the border. Probably they hear about it a few hours later. In the meanwhile, some shells have gone across. But that's the way it will work. And the issue of Israel being hit by the rockets from Hamas, this is a classic case of what we call an asymmetric warfare. That, what is happening right now, even in the in that area, the Houthis are targeting shipping. They're targeting American, the carrier force there by using unconventional means, by firing rockets and, other weapons from areas which you don't expect them to come from, using some other countries probably to launch these. So retaliation may not be as swift and prompt as would have been planned in a classic conflict between two known adversaries. Here the Hamas in particular is a sort of a dispersed adversary. It is not a nation that you're fighting against. So therein lies the big difference between what is happening there and what's happening in our country.
Good evening. My name is Arthaus. My question for Air Chief is, sir, do you believe global buying decisions will now change, given a lot of capabilities were tested for the first time? I mean, S-400 Russians, Bayraktar, Turkish drones, of course, Scalp Hammer. I mean, Rafale is a given. Given that now a lot of JC, 10Cs, of course, the Chinese. So a lot of conversation around stock prices going up and down. So do you think buying, not just with India, but globally will change? And of course, we've increased our defense export budget from 13,000 to 50,000 crore.
See, once again, it is, I would insist that it is the capability that we require. If the capability is not readily available today and I need something today, then probably we'll have to procure it from somewhere else. But in the long run, you cannot fight a war, you cannot fight a conflict with somebody else's weapons or, relying on weapons from some other country. Ultimately, you will need to have your own. So it's a matter of time when we can say that we are fully self-reliant in all the weapons that we need.
And so the world has seen what works, what doesn't for the first time.
Yeah.
Yes. You have the microphone, and let me just see. Now we should reach that side. Yes. We should not have such a leftward slant. The right matters, yes.
Hello. Thank you, sir. I'm Prabodh Thakkar. I have seen in 71 war, there was a black declared in Mumbai city. We didn't do it this time. So is it that we were confident about ourselves or we saw limitations in Pakistan reach?
It's होना चाहिए था. बॉम्बे को भी अकल आती उसके बाद.
See, blackout is one, what we call a passive air defense measure. It's not an active air defense. You're just ensuring that you're not exposing your high value targets for the enemy to see easily. Unfortunately, in today's day and time, most of the long range weapons do not require, the lights to be on or off to see the targets. Okay, so a target in depth today really is not going to be so badly affected by putting the lights on or passive air defense measures like this.
Well, I will tell you the explanation we were given is that particularly border districts, border states, a lot of the drones were coming. So if the city is very well lit, then sometimes you have a problem sighting the drones. And that was also the reason given why the Golden Temple agreed to switch off the light, so that even the slightest drone activity could be caught there. It would not get lost in the glare. So I think that's logical.
Hi, good evening. I'm Aprajit. I'm a member at Quorum. I had a question specifically for Mr. Gupta. The first one is that, Pakistan uses most of its money for terrorism or for military. In the middle of the war, they're getting $1 billion. I'm hearing that World Bank has sanctioned $20 billion for building bridges in that country. What are we doing to prevent Pakistan from getting more money? Because every dollar that they get is essentially spent towards, funding Jaish-e-Mohammed and a bunch of these guys. That's the first question. And the second one is slightly more down the funny alley. Asia's Michael Phelps was swimming at 4:30 in the morning. Why didn't we wait till his prayers were over to fire his rockets? That's a question too. Because he just mentioned yesterday in Azerbaijan that
Fajr ki namaz ke baad fire karna tha usne bola tha. So the first one is a very simple thing. Pakistan is a sovereign country. Pakistan is today too dangerous to fail. The whole world knows it's too dangerous to fail. And I will just quote our professor, Steve Cohen, from whom we all learned so much, late Professor Cohen, who used to say that Pakistan negotiates with the world by putting the gun to its own head. Right? Ya meri baat maan ja or I will pull the trigger, then you deal with the mess. It's a country of 25 crore angry people with 170 nuclear weapons, with nearly 1 million strong army, which is capable of following orders and which is capable of modernization. So this is a country of consequence. We didn't choose our neighbors. Mr. Vajpayee used to say you can never choose your neighbors. So there's no way the rest of the world will. Can you imagine if Pakistan becomes completely chaotic and Jaish-e-Mohammed actually took over power in Pakistan? Or any fundamentalist groups took over power. The fact is that fundamentalist parties in Pakistan have never crossed 10% of the vote share. They stay below that. So these are things that we have to we have to understand. The second thing is nothing stops us from spending more. No, this is not something that dear Chief Marshal will say, but I will say in his presence, that our defense spending today as a percentage of our GDP is less than it was under Nehru leading up to the 1962 war. So there's been a lot of complacency. And before Mr. Modi came to power, he also promised one rank, one pension. So pension bill has gone up. So I'm hoping that now defense budget will start going up. It is for India to keep the peace around itself. India has to spend a lot more on defense. I think that's my part of the answer, sir. I have solved your problem by answering this.
Thank you. I think you said it all. The timing, of course, it's a matter of tactics, which I'll not discuss as to why the thing. Also, as an aside, maybe that's a good time to avoid collateral damage in case there are people around there at that point of time.
And I'm going to be asked by. I'm for India, by the way, but I'm going to be asked by Pakistani leaders in India has asked me 15 jets have been down.
And one Rafale has been down, okay, according to them. Now, if you ask me, how do I answer that question?
It is best to keep the enemy guessing.
See, I will tell you a small thing. If in a war, it's a trick question. If in a war, one side lost 5 aircraft, it's a real war. One side lost 5 aircraft, the other side lost 13 aircraft. Who won the war? And no, I'm just asking you a question. Who won the war? 5 and 13. And please, I'm not talking about Op Sindoor, so please don't reach out for beta blockers, right? In some war, a real war, one side lost 5, one side lost 13. The general view would be the guy that lost 13 lost the war, right? What am I talking about? I'm talking about the war in the eastern sector in 1971. Pakistan lost 5, after which they stopped flying and their pilots escaped in commandeered civilian aircraft and left their remaining aircraft behind. The Air Force, Indian Air Force could have stopped fighting. But Indian Air Force is not just fighting Pakistan Air Force. Indian Air Force is an aggressive Air Force. It's helping the larger military plan and the national cause. So Indian Air Force kept on going low and supporting the army units, and all of those losses are to ground fire and to small arms fire. So it's a question of what you use air power for. This is not a T20 match that, a score ho raha hai, kiska run banega zyada,
वो ऐसे नहीं होता है. It's a question of it's a doctrinal issue, and that's something that Pakistanis never get, because Pakistani doctrine is defensive. Boxer होता है ना, एक boxer attack करता है, एक boxer पीछे खड़ा होता है with gloves in front of his face. So that's
more outside India. So is that look?
Pakistanis are exaggerating like mad when 5 aircrafts, 1 Rafale, everything else is exaggerated. But to say that we are quiet about anything that we've lost in the victory that we've got is something which you have to answer about.
Not me. Yeah.
As far as the losses are concerned, it's a very good question. It's something that we've been asking the government too. And today, the serious General Anil Chauhan at the Shangri-La dialogue, he's said that he's admitted to losses. He's not given the total number of losses that are there or the kind of aircraft that has been lost.
Although he said absolutely not true on the claim of 6 by Pakistan.
On the claim of 6, he said absolutely not true. I think that's information that generally some of us would also have, is the fact that 6 aircraft have not been lost. But as SG was mentioning, so that is something that serious General Anil Chauhan has already said. But we are yet to hear from the government and from the military about the total number of aircraft losses that have taken place. And that is why I asked in the initially itself, how do we rate Op Sindoor? What is the success of Op Sindoor? Should it be measured in terms of 100 terrorists being killed, or let's say 4 or 5 or 3 aircraft being lost? How do you measure Op Sindoor, the success of Op Sindoor, when he goes abroad, when he talks to the people outside?
Primarily, what is the strategic aim? What is the operational aim? Have we achieved it or not? The answer is a resounding yes. So that's all is there to it.
The answer is the picture. The Air Force had gone first to hit those places in Muridke and Bahawalpur. All those are rubble. So whatever Pakistan Air Force might be, they were not able to prevent the Indian Air Force from hitting its targets. And then you have pictures of every Pakistani air base. Those are public. And they said they attacked India's air bases. They don't have one picture, right? They don't have any picture. So how can it be? Because everything is picked up by Maxar these days. Anybody can buy from
But they
Maxar.
did put out satellite pictures, which was later proved that those were
Photoshop
satellite images.
No, but I'm all Indian. For you, by the way. But I'm saying that when I go across and somebody
Pose this question at me, I have to answer. And to say that, look, as you've said, okay, this is not a question, this is not an answer, this is not something which I want to answer, is very easy. Very easy for me to, and I'm actually giving credence to Pakistan by saying I don't want to answer. Actually, when they say 5 jets, they're exaggerating. They've knocked out 1 Rafale, 5 jets, they are exaggerating like mad. But I have to say that, look, we've lost nothing. I don't know.
I think here is where diplomacy comes in. You have to put it as, diplomatically as you can. The point what the Raksha Mantri, for example, mentioned a few days ago was that in a wrestling match, Kushti mein, he says, even though you have won, you don't, finally count how many times you have been punched. Okay, the question is whether you have won the Kushti. So you don't count how many times, in a boxing bout, you don't count how many times, the opponent has managed to touch you.
Your question is actually a very genuine question. It's a serious question. I think that is something that we've been asking the government too. But on the 10th evening or on the 11th morning is when, that same question was asked to the DG Air Operations, Air Marshal Bharti. And at that time, he had said that losses are part of combat, which we all agree to. But on the numbers, he said that the conflict, the operation is still on, and any information that I give right now will give advantage to the enemy. But at no point, so we are just waiting for the operation to get over. And I'm sure that the Air Force would come out with facts and figures. For example, he also said that the Pakistanis have lost aircraft too, right? Both, I can say, what we've been told is that both in air and on ground. But still, India has officially not yet claimed the losses on Pakistani side also. So that's a very genuine question. Today, the CDS has admitted to the fact that there have been losses, but he's said the number of 6 is absolutely not true. So which means that the number is lesser, but yes, the aircraft losses have taken place. We'll wait for clarity from the Air Force and the government when
you go to attack, you will be exposed, because it's when a boxer goes into attack, the boxer is exposed. So that's the answer. But I think when a Pakistani asks you, you say, "Beta, apne photos dikha air bases ki, or Bahawalpur ki, or Murid ki," right? So because those are available. And the other question that I think it's a logical thing, and we also understand that as journalists, that this is an ongoing operation. One side is not telling you anything. We know about this destruction in Pakistan because of international satellite pictures, but they are not saying anything. If you start saying, "I've lost this system or this aircraft or any 1, 2, 3, whatever number," then it helps the adversary to plan accordingly. That I was planning for, say, X number of this. Now I have to think about X minus this number of this. So those are things that are usually not disclosed until dust really settles. And that is something that we respect as journalists also. In the back.
Hi, thank you so much for having this panel. It's really enlightening for all of us.
Please tell us your name.
I'm Vidushi, and this is actually a shared question of my father and I. It's something that we debate about a lot. But I want to cite something that you mentioned of a previous interview of Senior General Chauhan, specifically about the nuclear war aspect of this war, and how he mentioned that this was never on the table in today's interview. But I wanted to ask about, what this reflects upon. Is this more of some sort of back channel diplomacy? Or is it actually a reassurance, but the risks, still quietly linger?
This conflict has been a little unique in the sense that we've used offensive air power, we've taken offensive action under the overhang of the nuclear threat. But you're aware the Prime Minister has publicly announced also that we will not bow down to this kind of threats from their side. And to be able to, it is not actually a paradox, but to be able to confine the escalation of the conflict below a certain threshold is something that we achieved very successfully.
So India actually has a publicly stated nuclear doctrine. You can go to the web and find it. It's clearly stated. It says, first of all, no first use of weapons of mass destruction. But if there is a use of weapons of mass destruction of any kind, nuclear, chemical, biological against India, then it's not a question of chota sa tactical use kiya, no. Then the response from India will be overwhelming and totally destructive. So Pakistanis also know it. So nuclear weapons is not what anybody plays with.
There are reports from London as well as a lot of WhatsApp saying that Khan Airport nearby, there was a nuclear facility. And it's also said that it is of United States of America. And therefore, Mr. Trump got panic. And there is some leakage in that place. These are the WhatsApp report and some newspaper who are reporting from London. Can you speak anything on that?
I think the DG Air Ops in the press conference on the 11th made it clear that...
वो इसका ही सवाल था. Yeah. DG Air Ops.
That we did not strike that facility. Everything else that is available on the WhatsApp University site is anybody's guess.
See, ultimately, nuclear weapons powers are very responsible powers because they know what can happen. And also, to basic physics that I might know, even if somebody hit somebody's nuclear weapons facility, radiation will not leak, because it's not as if warheads are kept married with the launch vehicles. That's a whole elaborate process. There is a whole escalation ladder. So I think there was some sensationalism. So to which Snehesh tried to add at the 3 commanders briefing, Army, Navy, Air Force, he asked Air Marshal Bharti that Kirana Hills, where Pakistan stores its nuclear weapons, you hit that, and Snehesh, you tell them what the answer was.
Well, the answer, the Air Marshal Bharti, in his own usual candid way, in a very joking way, he mentioned that thank you for letting us know that there is an underground nuclear facility, right? And then he ruled out the fact that, and the reason why I asked the question was also because there was a lot of WhatsApp university forwards that came to me also. There was a lot of social media buzz about the fact that India hit a nuclear facility, knowing very well that that's where it is. I think, I didn't believe it even for 1 second, because from whatever that I know of the Indian military or the way that we function, it would have been out of question for India to hit a nuclear facility, right? Or risk hitting a nuclear facility of Pakistan. India is not a rogue country. Every step that India undertook was a calculated escalatory step. And every time India struck the option, and this is what I done a story on it, every time India struck, India had told the Pakistanis that, boss, we've done this. It's now up to you. If you don't fire, we will not fire. So India was very careful in the escalatory steps that were taken, and at no point of time was India ever planning to strike any nuclear facility of Pakistan, at least in this operation.
You have somebody there.
My name is Maya. I just wanted to ask you a simple question. The first wave of attack that was done on Muridke and Bahawalpur, you got the terrorists. But then the second wave of attack, you were attacking their hangars and their radars, and us time zor se marna tha na, sabko khatam karna tha.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. But like we've been using these words, calibrated response, gradual escalation. So these are the words which are being bandied about, and this actually succinctly puts across our strategy there, that they hit our air bases, or they tried to hit our air bases with drones and missile attacks, all of them which were, shot down. So we suffered no loss, but our response was that you hit our air bases, we will hit back your air base. And this is what we can do. If you try to escalate it, we will hit harder with more ferocity.
Hey, it's Parth. My name's Parth Gandhi. So my question for you is, you have expensive capital assets like aircraft carriers, and you now have all these cheaper drones which can take down expensive equipment pretty quickly, inexpensively. What is the role of aircraft, and what does the services of the future look like? 25 years from now, do you have a lot of capital equipment, or do you go down to very fragmented, very basic, cheap drones, which can take down a lot of expensive equipment?
It's going to be a combination of 3 or 4 elements. One is, of course, the long-range vectors that I alluded to. The second is the attritable or the expendable equipment, like the drones, which will form the lower end of the spectrum. All this superimposed with cyber capabilities. So these are the 3 primary domains in which I see any future conflict will
what's the mix, though? What's the mix, right? The question is, you've got limited resources always in life. What is the right mix that you have? Because you could theoretically be building out Gen 6, Gen 7, Gen 8 when you may not need to do it.
Exactly. So if you are weak in one domain, then you strengthen your capabilities in another. If your strength of, let's say, long-range vectors or strength of some equipment is inadequate as compared to the adversaries, then you build up strength in, in your cyber capabilities or in some other domain, in the naval domain maybe, or maritime domain. So it's always a balance, something which is analyzed regularly by the armed forces, and the capital acquisitions and the long-term planning takes these into considerations. What are the 3 points? One is what the adversary has got. The second is what your doctrines tell you what is to be done. And the third is what is the new technology that's available. So all these three put together will always decide the balance of the force that you're going to have.
So, the whole drone warfare is something that became famous or infamous after the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict. And then we saw that in Russia too. Indian Air Force or the Indian military used Harrops, among other drones to strike. When did actually the Indian Air Force start inducting drones? I think it inducted over 2 decades back, way back in...
Yeah, in early 2000s is when we started inducting loitering munitions and drones. And there's a lot we have learned from the battles, like you mentioned, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia, Ukraine. And the ubiquity of the utilization of drones is understood. What is most heartening is that today our drone capability is given to us by small industries in our country. Okay, so most of our drones and the anti-drone equipment is being procured by MSMEs and startups and small companies, which is a fantastic boost for our defense ecosystem.
So we'll take the last question.
Shekhar ji, thank you for the event and getting the best man in India possibly to answer our questions and making it so interactive. My name is Kuldeep. Sir, there is no doubt Operation Sindoor has been a very big success. But sir, we also beat Pakistan comprehensively in 1971. My question is it fair to assume today that China will more actively support Pakistan, and we may have a situation where today we are far superior to Pakistan, but if China needs to get actively involved in propping up Pakistan the way Pakistan was propping up his Mujahideen, then where do we stand, and then do we need to really accelerate whatever we have been discussing and take this to a very different level? Your views on this, sir. Thank you so much.
The collectivity between these two nations is well known, and we are well aware of what it will bring to the table, the way they exercise together. Pakistan is the only country with which China carries out exercises, and they learn a lot of Western tactics through the Pakistan Air Force. So we are well aware that whether it is one front or two front, the collision in some form or the other will always be there. Therefore, our preparedness is always against a collusive threat between these two nations.
Yes. And this is the last, unless, Doc, you have a question. You were raising your hand earlier. Okay.
Hello. Hi, my name is Rahul Jakthiani, and thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. Sir, I'm not a warmonger, neither am I a defense expert, but do you think the Indian mindset, much like the Indian cricket team of the 90s, is very defensive? Because they have entered our house and killed 26 of our people, literally pant kholke, and when we attack, our response is measured, non-escalatory, and very kind of like targeted. So do you think the optics of that is very defensive? Because we have Mullah Asim Munir, who has now been emboldened. Those 100 terrorists that we killed, for every one you kill, there are 10 waiting in the pipeline. Hafiz Saeed and the other guy, Azhar, are still alive. So do you think we've lost the narrative and the optics war? Because those guys are taking out victory rallies. And what Munir wanted to, rally the public in a failed state and get them behind the army, he succeeded there and he's got a promotion. So do you think they have actually, from their perspective, they won the war, regardless of the propaganda, and we're leaving the door open for another attack? Because we're saying next time we'll do this, next time we'll do that. We did that after Uri, we did that after Pathankot. So we're just going round and round. Okay, next time hum ye karenge, next time hum wo karenge. So we've left the door slightly open for another attack, which could happen anytime in the next couple of years, I guess. Thank you.
I think SG has written very well just yesterday on Munir's fifth star and what it means for us. But I would just like to briefly say that deterrence comes in many forms. One is by amassing, military equipment. The other is the second is by showing your intent. So if you can deter somebody by purely having a strong armed force, it is good. Like you said, if you're not a warmonger, it's good to have a strong army, navy, air force, and you're deterring the adversary. But the other way is to show your intent. And this, whether it was the strikes, the strikes in Uri or in Jabhat or Balakot or now, is a showing of our intent. And I think there can be no better deterrent than this.
And while the Air Force was in the front, of the 9 terror targets hit, 7 were hit by the army. Those were in the PoK and some areas in Pakistani Punjab across the international border, also in the Sialkot area. So it was quite a comprehensive hit. And that's how you can't go and kill a nation can't go and kill civilians in another country. Right. No. I mean, you are going into a very different domain that we should.
But on the Op Sindoor itself, I think one of the big takeaways is the fact that everybody focuses on the number of terrorists killed. I think for the first time since the 1971 conflict, you had India striking in the heart of Pakistan. As SG mentioned, the entire air bases were struck, and on the 7th, the headquarters of LET and the Jaish-e-Mohammed were struck. So it was India striking in the heart of Pakistan, which is Punjab. And, the Punjab is the heart and soul of Pakistan. So it was India striking there, as he said, was sending out a clear message of capability as well as that of intent.
Almost 65% of Pakistan's population is Punjabi. Dr. Anna.
Thank you. Dr. Anna, and thank you for a wonderful session. And I must congratulate you, Air Chief, that you answered it with full, as a gentleman, not saying beyond anything. Shekhar, my question is to you and to everybody there. When I heard the word Operation Sindoor, normally in the armed forces decides, let's call this Operation this. And I know there's a colonel and a havaldar who made the logo of Sindoor, Operation Sindoor. So my question to you is, was the name chosen by the Armed Forces Command, which normally chooses an operation when they're going to conduct an operation, or was it chosen not by them?
Well, the code name is so politically loaded that it had to come from the political leadership, right? And how the
logo was made by a colonel.
But once the name is chosen, somebody will make it.
So it was not made by.
And that's my guess that this was a political statement.
As SG already said, my guess would also be the fact that the choice of the name for the operation would have been more political rather than from a military point of view.
It was the best name possible. Thank you.
Very smart. So that said, since you asked me about armed forces find very boring code names for their operations. So in 1965, Indian Army crossed the international border, went into Pakistan. That was called Operation Riddle. Right? But Riddle ka kya matlab hai? Right? 1971 war was called Operation Cactus Lily. I don't know why it was called Cactus Lily. Operation Blue Star. So that story I know because this we know from General Tabi Nayyar, VK Nayyar, he was called Tabi Nayyar, former paratrooper. He was Director General Military Operations and he gave the name Blue Star
And he said, and then he wrote it in his autobiography also, from fatigues to civvies. That's his autobiography. And he said that, they had to find a name for this operation. Then late night after the day's work planning, he was going home, iska naam kya rakhe, iska naam kya rakhe. Then he saw some shop, some closed shop, air conditioning and refrigeration repair shop. Us par likha tha Blue Star Refrigeration, right? There used to be a fridge and AC brand called Blue Star. So he said, chalo iska naam Blue Star rakh dete. So this is actually in his autobiography. The Pakistanis, on the other hand, when they name their operations, they are loaded. They are so loaded that you can guess what they are. In 1965, when they sent infiltrators into Kashmir, you come from Kashmir, you know that story, and they were hoping that people of Kashmir will rise with these infiltrators. That was called Operation Gibraltar. Why Gibraltar? Because Gibraltar was the first foothold that the Islamic armies acquired in Europe, right? Because they first conquered Spain. So that was the first. And every band that came, infiltrators, it was called Khilji band, Ghazni band, like that. They were named like that. And even when the Pakistanis attacked at Cham, it was called Operation Grand Slam. So because they thought they were going to take Kashmir just like that. And now as they become more Islamized, they are using more Islamic names. That's why this Bunyan al-Marsus. But I take you back to 1986-87 when General Sundarji came up with exercise brass tacks, it didn't mean particularly anything. They were checking out our brass tacks. Pakistanis later planned a counter that was called Zarb-e-Mumin, which is again from Islamic scriptures and history, which means the strike of the faithful. So this has gone on with the increasing Islamization of the Pakistani armed forces, Zia and onwards. Otherwise, they give you more transparent. Indian armed forces just find some interesting names. So that's why I don't think they found this one. On this note, we should call it a day. Chief, you want to say a word in conclusion?
Thank you very much. I think excellent questions from the audience. Thank you for being so patient with us here. And I do hope that you will propagate the thought that air power can win us wars in future.
The Print Off the Cuff. Presenting partner HDFC Mutual Fund Bharosa Apno Ka. Experience partner The Quorum. Beverage partner. Fashion partner Burgoyne, the original linen, established 1912.